Well, hi, everybody. I'm Jason Cusick. I'm the lead pastor here at Journey of Faith. If you're new with us, thanks so much for joining us. Also, if you're new at our Torrance campus, we love you guys at our Torrance campus. So excited. We got our 2-year anniversary coming up. It's going to be amazing, great stuff happening there. So excited that we can be connected this way. If you're watching online, thanks for joining us. We're in a series of messages called The Good Book. And the Bible has been called The Good Book because it's written by a good God who has good news for how we can live a good life. The bad part of that is a lot of us find the Bible confusing and intimidating and kind of hard to read. And so what we're doing in this series is we're looking at some really basic Bible principles that can help us understand the Bible better. And these principles also impact our relationships with each other. So we're looking at that. We've done 2 of these messages so far. If you didn't get a chance to check those out, you can go on our app, you can go online on our website and check out those messages. Today we're going to be talking about another principle that can help us read the Bible better. Let me start though by sharing with you a story about Disneyland. We love Disneyland. We're in Southern California. We're crazy about Disneyland. I grew up going to Disneyland all the time when I was a kid, once a year going to Disneyland. And we love Disneyland. When I got married and we started having kids, I decided we're not going to go to Disneyland until the kids are old enough to ride everything and remember what happened. Because I'm like, if I'm paying that much money, I want them to fully experience it. So they finally got up to the age where I was like, now we're going to go. So we showed up, and I had my 2 boys, and the gates opened up. We went straight for Space Mountain, got on Space Mountain. It was amazing. We came up. My boys were like, that was so great. That was so scary. I was like, that was an e-ticket ride. And they were like, yeah, it was a what? What a ticket thing? And I realized at that moment, like, they didn't know what an e-ticket ride was. Some of you are like, I don't know what an e-ticket ride is. So let me give you a little context to kind of explain it. When Disneyland opened back in the 50s, I wasn't there when it opened, but it opened in the 50s, there wasn't a general admission price that got you into every ride. It was like a permanent carnival. So you went in and you bought a booklet of tickets for different rides. How many of you did this when you were going to? Right. Well, it's a lot of people. So it kind of stopped around like the early 80s. And so you'd have tickets and they were lettered. And some of the simpler, smaller rides were like A, B, and C. And you had a lot of those tickets, but then you only had like 1 or 2 E-tickets, and they looked like this. And these were the places everybody wanted to go, you know? And you could buy extra tickets, but the E-tickets was like the big stuff. Here's something kind of interesting. I didn't realize Disney still categorizes some of their stuff behind the scenes as E-ticket rides. So I realized in that moment, I needed to share some of my experience, my background, my history with my kids in order for them to understand what I mean. What I was doing was I was giving them context. And that's what we're going to talk about today. In order to understand what is true for Disneyland is true for the Bible. How about that for a quote out of context? You can use that. Understanding the culture that was happening in that day, understanding the people in that day, understanding history can help us understand the Bible better. In fact, sometimes when we're reading the Bible and we bump up against stuff that we don't understand or seems strange or unusual, we're usually bumping up against culture and context. In fact, some of the dicey theological issues that people debate about the Bible are usually issues related to context. Now, the Bible was written thousands of years ago by people who spoke different languages in different cultures. But fortunately, there's a lot of similarity. Like when you read the Bible, you read the stories of broken, flawed individuals who were trying to find what it means to have a relationship with God and having challenges with work and family and feelings and politics and culture. So that's where there's similarities. But there's also a lot of differences. And there's like a distance between who they were and who we are. So when we read the Bible, what we're trying to do is bridge the distance. That's a word that we use to say, what do I need to know about these people in this culture with their background so that I can relate to them better? And when you think about it, this isn't just something we should do with the Bible, this is something we should do in all of our relationships. It's easy to get along with people who think like you and act like you and believe like you and have the same cultural or racial or ethnic background as you. When we're bumping up the things against things that we don't understand, what we have to say is, what do I need to know about this person's experiences or thoughts or background or view or culture so that I can relate to them better? That's what we need to do in our world today. That can help us in our relationships with each other. It can help us in our relationships when we're trying to understand the Bible. And it can help us in our relationship with God. So here's the main idea for the message today related to context. We can experience God more through Bible reading if we understand the original context. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you 3 simple questions that you can ask yourself when you're reading the Bible that can help you think about the original context, hopefully help you understand more about what's going on in what you're reading. And then I'm going to share with you a Bible verse that is often misquoted and misunderstood. And we'll walk through these 3 questions together. So here's the first one. Question number 1 is, when you read something, you say, why was this written? So sometimes we have this view of the Bible like it's this holy book that just kind of descended out of heaven in abstraction. But the Bible was actually written by different authors. There's 66 different smaller books in the Bible, and each book of the Bible was written to a specific set of circumstances and to a specific group of people to address specific things. So when we read the Bible, we need to say, so why was this particular quote or verse or story or book written? Now, how do we find this out? Well, sometimes it's right in the passage. We just start reading it and we figure it out. I'll give you an example of that in a few minutes. But there's also some great resources available. We're living in the golden age of information. On the back of the guide that you got in, we've given you some resources. There's actually some books here you can get, and it'll give you like a summary, a very simple summary of every book of the Bible. That'll say, here's who wrote it. Here's why they wrote it. Here's about when it was written. Sometimes you can buy Bibles that are called study Bibles, and before you even read the passage, it'll give you a bunch of background. But you know what the best way to do it? Just start reading. And you often pick up right away what the reason for this writing was. So that's the first question you want to ask yourself when you're reading the Bible. Here's the second question. What kind of writing is this? The Bible is made up of different genres. Here's the word, Bible genres. That's a word that you need to know. How many of you know what the word genre means? So a genre is a particular kind or style of writing of literature or art. When you know the genre, then you know how to read it and you know what to expect. Let me give you an example that's not related to the Bible at all. If I were to say, I'm going to tell you a story. Once upon a time, how will that story end? Happily ever after, right? Why? Because it's a fairy tale. Did I tell you it was a fairy tale? No. But you knew it. Why? Because you know the genre. In fact, if I say, what kinds of things will you expect in a fairy tale? You'll be like, well, there's magic and there's romance and something bad happens and it turns around at the end and then suddenly everything's fine, because you know the genre. Knowing the genre helps you know how to read and what to expect. I'll give you another example. A rabbi and a donkey walk into a bar. Right. Now the question is, why did all of you laugh? None of you were like, do they let donkeys in bars? What's going on? Is this donkey, does it belong to the rabbi? Is it a local rabbi, or is this a rabbi in Israel? None of that. Why? Because you recognize that I was setting up what? A joke. And you're waiting for a punchline. And a punchline is a turn of phrase or an unexpected twist that has a humorous part to it, right? You know the code. You know the genre. So you know what to expect. So we do this intuitively all the time. You don't read the want ads the same way you read the obituary. At least I hope you don't read those the same way, you know? So you already know that. So the Bible has different genres, and if you know the genre, it helps you to read it a different way. And sometimes we get stuck in Bible reading because the genre switches, and we keep reading it the same way. So let me give you 6 genres that you're going to find in the Bible. For those of you that like taking notes, you can write them down or you can snap them with your photo. I'm going to send something out in the e-newsletter this week that'll explain this a little bit more. But here's 6 genres that you're going to find in the Bible. The first one is law. These are rules given to the people of Israel to establish their nation, right? So you're going to read certain parts of the Bible, it's going to be laws. Here's what you do with criminals. Here's what you do with real estate. Here's what you do with your diet. And these were laws given to the people of Israel to help structure their nation. It's not a story, although there's stories behind the law. When you read law, you're normally saying, what is this law attempting to do in the culture? Even if I can't relate to that specific law, there's a goal behind every law. And what do these laws tell me about who God is, right? So some of the parts of the Bible are law. Here's another genre. History. Positive and negative events in people's lives with God. Positive and negative events. Sometimes I had somebody come up to me a while back and they were like, I can't believe God approves of this terrible, violent act. And I said, why do you think God approves of it? Well, it's in the Bible. I said, well, it could be an example of what not to do. See, sometimes the Bible just gives us, here's what people do. And sometimes it says this is what God approves of. Sometimes it doesn't address that, and we're left to conclude, what does God think of these things based on some of the things that I read? So a large chunk of the Bible is actually history, things that happened in the past. So we read those stories. Here's another genre. Wisdom. Songs, proverbs, reflections on the spiritual life. This is poetry. There's a lot of imagery. It's very emotional. It can be very inspiring. It can be really dark and troubling. Sometimes it's like, God, I find such purpose in you. Other times there's parts of the Bible that says, I'm looking around the whole world and it's like everything's meaningless. These are wisdom books. Here's another genre of the Bible. Prophecy. Messages of warning and hope in specific circumstances. Prophecy often has these, the heavens opened up and there's angels speaking and there's supernatural things happening. There's images and metaphors and there's numbers that have symbolic value and they're very cryptic. There's quite a lot of prophecy in the Bible. Interestingly, most prophecy in the Bible is just describing a warning to people living in that day. Some people feel like all the prophecy is always about something that's going to happen at the end of time. Only about 1% of Bible prophecy is about the future. Most of it's just about what was happening in the present day when people were living. But prophecy is a genre. Here's another one. Gospel. These are summaries of Jesus' life and teachings. Gospels are very unique in the sense they're designed like ancient biographies. Ancient biographies just focused on, here's the basics of what you need to know. It's different than our autobiographies or biographies. You open up a biography today and it says, here's where they were born. And then it records every incident. Here's what they were doing when they were 18 and 19 and 21. People sometimes approach the Bible and say, I don't think the Bible's true because it doesn't even say what Jesus did when he was 17. And that's because it's not a biography like ours. It's historical, but it's designed specifically to help you understand what you need to know to believe and to follow him. And then there's one other genre I want to share with you, and it's this one, epistles or letters. These are letters written to Christians on different subjects. So we have a collection of letters written to people in the first century who were dealing with stuff just like we do, except they were dealing with it in their culture and in their time period, and there's timeless truth that we can apply to our day. So these are the Bible genres, and as you're reading, what you want to do is kind of stop and say, okay, now what kind of genre am I reading right now? And how can that help me know what I'm going to be able to read and what I can get out of it? Now you might say well, how do I know which genre it is? Well, these resources can help you, but again, you kind of start reading and you can kind of pick it up a little bit. I'll give you an example. I'll share with you a passage from the Old Testament and a passage from the New Testament, the first line from two books of the Bible, and we'll just kind of see, out of all the genres, what does it closest feel like that genre might be? Here's the book of Deuteronomy. These are the words that Moses spoke to all the people of Israel while they were in the wilderness east of the Jordan River. So of all the genres, kind of what are some that start popping in your mind that this might be? History, maybe law. Some of you are like, isn't Moses a prophet? Isn't this prophecy? Well, it's probably closest to history. We actually have locations of places. These are words that this is what Moses said when they were in this location. And now if Moses says, now here's the laws from God, then it might shift into a law book. And then it might shift back into a history book. And that might be what we call a mixed genre. There's more than one in there. Here's a quote from a book of the New Testament. Let's see if we can see what genre this is. This letter is from Paul. What genre do you think this is? It's a letter, right? And we know how letters go. When you write a letter, the letter goes, hey, I'm writing this to you. This is who it's from. And then it's, hey, great to hear from you, or I'm sorry I haven't seen you in a long time, and there's some greetings. And then it moves into the content, like, hey, the reason I'm writing you is this, or I want you to remember this, or remember when we talked about this? Here's what I want to share about it. And then at the end of the letter, it's, by the way, so-and-so says hi, and make sure you say hi to this person for me. And bring me my jacket the next time you visit, stuff like that. Actually, Paul does that in one of the letters in the New Testament. He's in jail because he's been imprisoned for being a follower of Jesus. And he writes this letter, and at the end, he was like, by the way, could you bring me my jacket and some books when you come visit me? I mean, that's how it ends, because it's a letter. And it has some wonderful things to say. And this one is from a book called 2 Corinthians, or in England, they don't say 2 Corinthians, they say 2 Corinthians. And so 2 Corinthians is the second letter from Paul to the people living in Corinth. And that's how you can kind of understand the genres, right? So you move in and out of genre. Read the Bible and say, what kind of book am I reading? Or what kind of genre am I reading? And it lets you know what to expect. And then here's the third question. What is the difference between their world and mine? Right? So the people writing back in that day, they lived in a different time and culture. So there's distance. And how can maybe understanding a little bit more about their culture or their history or their language or customs can help me understand what to do with what I'm reading. Let me give you a real practical example from a verse I struggled with for years. Here's a quote from Jesus. Let's bring that quote up. There we go. If a soldier demands that you carry his gear for a mile, carry it 2 miles. Now, I was at a party last night, and the guy sitting at my table was in the military. So thank you for all of you that serve in the military, those of you that have served. So grateful. Thank you. So I was at this table last night, and we talked for 30 minutes. At no point did he ask me to carry anything for him. And I've been around military people my whole life. Never has a military person said, would you carry my gun for me? Or here's my backpack. Would you carry this? So I'm going, Jesus, what do I do with this? This doesn't make any sense to me today. So I was reading this and I was going, what kind of soldier is he talking about? And demanding to carry gear. What is he saying? And why a mile? Why not 4 feet? Why not 26 miles? What is he talking about? So I did a little looking into this. I used some of the references in here, and I looked up online. So knowing the background, Jesus lived in the first century in Palestine, and Palestine was being run basically by the Roman government. So there were Roman soldiers everywhere. One of the interesting things about Rome was the Roman soldiers had a law that at any point a Roman soldier could ask somebody and require them to carry their gear for 1 mile or 1,000 steps, and you were legally required to do it. So Jesus says to the people in his day, If a soldier demands that you do this, don't just do it for 1 mile, carry it for 2 miles, which I think is really interesting because the Romans were oppressing and exploiting the Jewish people in their day. It's interesting that Jesus didn't say, if those sinful Roman political leaders who are your enemies, that corrupt government that is in charge, if they require you to do something, stand up for your rights and protest and say, I will not do this. This is a violation of my beliefs. I'll have nothing to do with it. Interesting, he didn't say that. He said, carry it and then carry it 1 more mile. This is what it would have looked like. A Roman soldier comes up to you in the first century and says, carry my stuff now. As a follower of Jesus, you would say, okay. And then you would carry it. You get up to the 1,000 steps, and this Roman soldier's like, all right, give it back, you're done. You go, no. I'll carry it more. Let's go another 1,000. At that point, the Roman soldier would be like, wait, what? What are you doing? So I'm following Jesus. Jesus taught love. Jesus taught humility. Can you imagine the conversation that might take place over those next 1,000 steps? I think that's what Jesus was doing. He was inviting not only that people of faith could share their faith and take opportunities with the enemy, take opportunities with people that are so unlike us where we can share our faith, but also it's us not just doing the minimum required. In fact, we have a phrase for this in American culture, right? Go the extra mile. That's where we get it from. The idea is like, don't just do the minimum. If I was doing this just as a sermon, I would say, is there an area of your life where you're just doing the minimum? At your job, you're like, look, I got the reports in. I did it. Maybe in your marriage. Like, look, I haven't broken my marriage vows. Isn't that enough? You know? Or in school, you're like, I got a C. Okay? I mean, I passed. You know? Or in your spiritual life. I prayed once today, you know? Or I served, I put in my time at church. Or giving. Some of you give, and you give generously, and you're like, look, I gave my 10%. I'm done. All the rest is mine. God, what do you want from me? God might be like, actually, I want you to go the extra mile. Don't settle for mediocrity. God wants to do something more in us. So see how understanding context can take something in the Bible that's just 2-dimensional and make it 3-dimensional. If we just study a little bit more, just look into a little bit of a background. Now, you might say, well, how much history do I have to know? How much context do I need to know? I asked my professor this at Bible school one time. I said, how much history do I need to know? He said, just enough to get the point. Some of us love history. We'll spend all the day studying it. But we need to know just enough to say, do I understand what's being said? So let's do this, okay? Let's take a passage of the Bible, and I'm going to show you a verse that has always been taught a certain way and share it with you, and then we'll just ask the questions. Now, I'm going to go through this a little bit quick, and you might be like, wow, this looks so simple, and then you try to do it on your own. This isn't taking me 10 minutes. Like, this takes a little bit more time. So I'm kind of rushing through it a little bit, but I want to show you how we can get there, and hopefully this can help you, hopefully it can be really practical, in your life. So here's the quote. It comes from the book of Revelation, not a complicated book at all. Chose the most confusing book. And some of you are going to go home and read Revelation and be like, wow, I can understand it. And you're like, I don't even understand what this says. Look, most of the book of Revelation is super confusing. But this part we'll focus on and we'll see if we can get something out of it. So here's the quote. It says, I know all the things you do, that you are neither hot nor cold. I wish that you were one or the other. But since you're like lukewarm water, neither hot nor cold, I will spit you out of my mouth. Dang. It's like, oh my gosh, we got to figure out who's saying that and what does that mean. But that's in the book of Revelation. So the question that we have to ask ourselves, some of you are like, see, I knew this was going to be about church. God's just spitting us all out. Some of you are new, you're like, this is going to be so much judgment. Hang on. I think we're going to get to a good point together. Let's go back, because this is in a section of chapter 3, let's ask the first question, why was this written? In order to do that, let's go back to the beginning of the book of Revelation. and see if we get any insights on that. So let's go back to the beginning. It says, this is a revelation from Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his servants the events that must soon take place. So this is written from Jesus, revealed from Jesus, and it's to do what? To show his servants the events that soon must take place. Now, it's written to his servants, meaning people who want to follow Jesus, about events that will soon take place. Now, this was written way back in the first century. So the events that are going to soon take place, maybe that was what happened right after. Maybe it's in the past. Maybe it's describing something in the past. Or it could be describing something that's going to happen to us in the future, or it could be both in some way. We don't know. It isn't clarified by this one part. But it does say that the events are going to take place soon. So there seems to be some kind of urgency to it, right? There's this message of warning or a message of hope. You got to know this. This is really important because something's going to be happening and you need to know this. Okay? Second question. What kind of writing or genre is this? Well, it says it's a revelation from Jesus Christ. That word revelation means unveiling. That's a very dramatic kind of term. And for those of you that might have heard and maybe never read the book of Revelation, there's a lot of numbers and symbols and weird kind of messages and warnings and beautiful presentations of some future place and an event. So what genre would you most likely say that this might be? It's like prophecy, right? So there's a message of warning or hope, and it's about particular circumstances. You can look into it a little bit more. Interesting thing, if we say it's prophecy, we start reading, and then we get right before the quote we looked at that we're going to kind of interpret together. And here's what it says. In this prophecy, it says, write this letter to the angel of the church in Laodicea. This is a message from the one who is the Amen, the faithful and true witness, the beginning of God's new creation. Again, all this symbology and imagery. But it says this is a letter. So now we have this prophecy, and then within the prophecy we have a letter. And we know how to read a letter. A letter is written to a specific group of people or a person, and then it describes what they're going through. So if we're going to read a letter, we ask the third question. What is the difference between their world and mine? This letter said that it is addressed to the people living in a place called Laodicea. So we need to ask the question, what is the difference between Laodicea back in the first century and the South Bay? Now, the good part is Laodicea, this isn't Narnia. This is like a real place. This was a place, the city was located in what we know as modern-day Turkey, and we have to say, what do we know about Laodicea? So you know what I did? I looked up online, and I looked up Laodicea. So Laodicea was kind of a place where not a lot of people lived in, and then suddenly everybody moved in, and all the real estate got expensive. Does that relate to the South Bay? That's pretty good. All right, maybe Laodiceans are a lot more like us. It was also, they had a lot of earthquakes in Laodicea. Wow, all right. I think we got more in common with the Laodiceans. Here was an interesting thing. I said, gosh, Laodicea, and then they use this hot and cold and lukewarm water thing. So I looked up the words Laodicea and water. And you know what I found out? Laodicea was located in what's called the Lycus River Valley. And to the north, there were hot springs. And to the south, there were cold springs, and Laodicea was in the middle. Now, in that day, they had these aqueducts that would move the water to Laodicea. Here's the problem. By the time the hot water and the cold water got to Laodicea, it was lukewarm. So you can imagine somebody going, oh my gosh, I've been working all day. I just want some cold water. And they dip their hand in there and they're like, ugh, this isn't cold water at all. Or they go, oh my gosh, it's so cold right now and I just want to make some hot tea, or I want to take a warm bath. Let me get that hot water. And they scoop it up. They're like, ah, this is lukewarm. It's not hot or cold. Ugh. What it seems as if the writer of this letter to Laodicea says, You know how you guys have hot water and cold water, but you don't like lukewarm water? I want to say something about how you guys are doing spiritually. You are neither hot nor cold. I wish that you were one or the other. But since you're like lukewarm water, neither hot nor cold, I'm going to spit you out of my mouth. So, you know how you spit lukewarm out of your mouth because it's not what you expected? You're expecting, and it looks good. The water looks good. Man, this is great. Well, this is going to be great. Then you get into the water and you go, this is not what I expected it to be. And it's not hot. I've heard this, hot is on fire for God. That's good. Cold is not on fire for God. That's bad. It's not hot is good and cold is bad. Hot is good. Cold is good. You know what isn't good? Is when you see something on the surface and it looks one way, but then beneath the surface, it's not. And then the next verse after this, in this letter, here's what he says. You, in Laodicea, you say, I'm rich. I have everything I want. I don't need a thing. And you don't realize that you're wretched and miserable and poor and blind and naked. You look good on the outside, but internally, it's not good. So what he's doing is he's kind of appealing to them that sometimes we're presenting really well, but internally it might not be like that. I just had this last week. I went to see my therapist on Friday, and the last time I had seen my therapist, he said, hey, how are you doing with your anxiety and your stress and this negative thought process and who God says you are versus who you feel like you are? I said, you know what? I feel like I'm doing really good. I feel like I'm doing a lot better. And he was like, gosh, that's so great. Is that true? Or are you just presenting well? Because you do this for a living. You present in front of people. Are you presenting something to me? And I was like, I don't know. Ask my wife. So this week, my wife came in. I said, now you ask her what you asked me, and we'll figure out if I'm just presenting well. Because sometimes what we do is we present well, but internally things aren't so great, right? Some guy in the last service texted me. He said, man, we had a word for this when I was growing up. Vague on the outside, or vogue on the outside, vague on the inside. That's what he said. Thought that was great. What God wants us to do, much like what Jesus said, is don't just settle for the minimum. Don't just be mediocre. Y'all look great. But what do you need to work on? What area of life do you need to invite God more fully into? And that's what Jesus wants. It's not about, now do more, do this more, be better at this. It's not that. It's an invitation to say yes to Jesus. In fact, when we keep reading this, we end up getting to what Jesus said. Look at Revelation 3:20. He says, look, I stand at the door and knock. If you hear my voice, open the door, I'll come in and we'll share a meal together as friends. Again, another metaphor. He's saying to the Laodiceans, look, you got your life, but I'm out here. I'm like, will you let me in? And if you come in, I'm not going to jam you up. I'm not going to go nuts on you. I want to come in and I want to share my life with yours. I've got blessings. I've got things to give you. I want you to understand who I say you are. That's the kind of relationship that God wants us to have with him. And if you're new with us, maybe you're visiting for the first time, maybe you're just checking out God and faith and spiritual things, that's what we want you to walk away with. That Jesus is like, say yes to me. Because you're created to be someone amazing. And there's a God, a loving God that has created this world, and he's given us a good book, and it's got good news about how to live a good life. And when we dive into it, we realize that Jesus is there wanting to be more a part of our lives, and he wants us to be more a part of his life. And if you want to know more about that, don't leave today until we get a chance to talk with you about that, or leave us your name. Context allows a two-dimensional idea to become three-dimensional. And so when we read the Bible, we should be thinking, what are the circumstances? What kind of genre is this? So I know how to read it. And then is there some history or culture that will help me understand what I'm reading better? Because the goal is when we read the Bible, we need to live in their world for a while so that we can figure out how it relates to our world. And that has a direct connection with even just the title of this message, which is live in their world. We want to live in their world, but we also realize we live in God's world. And so God, help us get a better understanding of what we need to know so we can live for you. So that's how we're going to close our service today. Would you stand with us standing over at Torrance? And again, we were like, is there a song? Is there something we do on the way out? Here's what we're doing on the way out. Go read your Bible, And if you don't have a Bible, we have Bibles for you. Head out to Next Steps. We have a Bible for you. Great resources available where you can grow and learn. Just get into it. Start reading it. Use some of these principles. And next week, we're going to talk about the big principle that all of this leads up to. If you're with us for the first time, again, thank you so much for being here. If you have something that you would like someone to pray with you about, we're going to have some wonderful volunteers after the service that would like to do that. On the way out, for those of you that call Journey of Faith your home church, we have our fellowship fund offering, just another way to give to financially help other people in the congregation going through difficult financial times. Let me close us in prayer. Gracious God, we thank you. You're a good God. You've given us a good book with good news so we can live a good life. God, help us to be able to open up that book and step into the original context of those readers so that we can bridge that distance. And help us bridge the distance with people in our lives, that they're different than us and they have different experiences. And help us to learn what we need to learn so that we can get closer to them and help them experience the life that you have for them. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. God bless you. Have a great week.